the more technical the information that you're dealing with, the harder it is for people to understand information, the higher the value of AI. The value you're going to create is making companies more productive and helping them drive revenue faster and more efficiently. Think about it at scale and think about technical information similar to, I've written a lot of data sheets at Silicon Labs. You have a lot of corporate documents, you have data sheets, you have application notes, you have quotes, you have all the different unstructured data in the company that's spread out all over the place, and it's very hard for people to understand or to even find where it is. And to be able to do that, like on one document, you've got diagrams, schematics, figures, tables, flow charts, all sorts of graphical information, and then you've got, these are deep technical topics and what relates to what, understanding what's in a document, not just extract the text, put it in a database, and rag it. It's really understand what that means and what relates to what in one document.
Hello and welcome to Fireside with the VC. My name is Andrew Romans, and today I'm with one of the great Austin, Texas founders, Tyson Tuttle. Tyson is the CEO of Circuit AI, where we're fortunate enough to be investors in their seed round. And they've just completed, and we've all signed our docs for finishing a Series A on March 31st of 2026. So that just happened. Tyson's, if you've ever been to Austin, you probably notice big signs of Google on the skyline, but you also see Silicon Labs. Tyson was engineer, CTO, COO, and CEO, and led that company to, I'd love another time to get the full story on going public in March of 2000, right? Which I believe is like the day they announced the breakup of Microsoft from the apps to the OS, which my view is the pin.
That was the peak of the tech boom back in those days, and by the time our lockup expired, our stock had gone from 100 to 10, and right. It was an interesting ride, but quite a day.
Yeah, I mean, that justifies its own focus session sometime, but to get through introductions, Tyson led Silicon Labs with that IPO to what looked like a steady 3.5 billion market cap on the NASDAQ, and then was it February of this year, right? This has been a busy 2026 for you.
Acquired by Texas Instruments for $8 billion. And that was after divesting right at the tail end. Kind of my last act as CEO is we had pivoted the company into the Internet of Things. So we were doing the software and the hardware for connected devices, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, that sort of stuff, and had sold off all of our legacy businesses to another public company for $2.75 billion. It was during the pandemic. It was in the middle of 2021. And so I retired out at the really the beginning of 2022. And then they just recently, that Internet of Things business just was acquired by TI for $8 billion in February. It still has to close and get approvals and that sort of stuff. A little bit bittersweet because it is one of the OG Austin success stories, public companies. It does stay in Texas, which is a good thing and a good home. They had built the fabs and a lot of the geopolitical pressure and the supply chain benefits of that are very, very compelling. So it's great to see that, but it's also fun to I said when I left, I was in semiconductors for 30 plus years. I've been in Moore's Law for 40, and when you're in Moore's Law, you get this abundance mentality because every 2 years you get twice as many transistors to play with, and so right. I've doubled 20 times, and 2 to the 20th is a factor of 1 million. So the first chip I worked on in college, which was actually a neural net accelerator. I was fascinated with the neural nets and all the math and all that stuff back in the late 80s and early 90s. My master's thesis was a neural net accelerator chip, and there was no practical application of this stuff, but it was really, really interesting. But you roll that forward 40 years, 30 some years, factor of 1 million, one transistor becomes 1 million transistors, and so now you can do this stuff at scale, and 2 to the 20th is a big number. And so here we are. I always said when I left semiconductors that I wanted to move more into software. AI is essentially software, a new computing paradigm. And it's really, we see just a green field of opportunity in that space. So I've done like 7 startups throughout my career. went into data communications, and so worked at Broadcom, and then was at Silicon Labs for 25 years. So was involved in all the major new product lines that we worked on, including transforming the company over to IoT. And going and running a bigger company didn't sound like the most fun thing to do. I considered VC and I considered private equity and a bunch of different things, but it's like if you're going to invest your own money and you're going to invest your time and you're going to invest other people's money, it's like I'm an engineer by heart, and or probably by birth, and building something and figuring out how to create value and taking everything you've learned in the world. This is a whole new frontier. Things are changing so fast, it's so exciting. And building something from scratch with a blank sheet of paper is that's ultimately where things came down. About 2 years ago, close to 2 years ago, I sat down with my first co-founder, Matt Weiss, CFO, and we said, all right, we're going to set out to go and apply AI into the economy. And so that's the new journey I'm on.
Yeah. So when I met Matt first, and then you, I thought, man, if these guys wanted to start a pizzeria.
Almost a year ago that we sat down, and we've come a long way in that year.
It has. So how did you even come together with Matt Weiss? And for those that don't know, Matt Weiss was early employee at Anduril, Parker Luckey, which is, the more you learn about that company, you just can sit there watching YouTube videos all night long of what it does. And
pretty incredible guy. So he was born in New York City, did undergrad and then MBA at Wharton. And his grandma, I knew his grandmother before he was born. And his grandmother,
Matt Weiss, not
yeah. And my mother-in-law and Matt were. Or my mother-in-law and his grandmother were kind of best friends in New York, and so I had always heard stories about Matt. And then when he was at Penn, he called me up just to interview me. I was running a company, and he wanted to talk to me, so I met him for the first time then, and then when he was at Anduril, he was part of their M&A team. Really helped set up the M&A team. He was very early there,
which was a very acquisitive company, right?
Yeah. And they were looking at a company in Austin. I think they were doing gimbals or something like that. It ended up not working out, but we sat down and we had dinner, and then he subsequently went. His grandfather served in the Marines, so he decided to leave Anduril. I think his father was about to kill him. Like, what are you thinking? Going and he became a military Marine intelligence officer. So he went through officer training, deployed to the Far East, and I was, I had his contact, and I was headed out to California, and I sent him a note, and he was at Camp Pendleton, and it was his last day in the Marines, the day before I was going to be there. So I accelerated my trip. I was like, all right, let's go to lunch, and by the end of lunch, he was headed to KKR to go work for General Petraeus. Private equity, and by the end of lunch, he was moving to Austin to start this company with me. And I also, you always know that you can't do these types of things by yourself, and you've got to have strong people alongside you that complement you. And so I knew Matt with the finance background and the M&A background, and just the level of energy that he's got. He's a great communicator. He's written a book on recruitment of Gen Z in the military, and is an incredible guy. So he became a co-founder, and then three folks that I'd worked with previously at Silicon Labs. I've got 4 co-founders plus myself. So Andrew Peters joined Silicon Labs. We worked together for a decade, and he moved from Silicon Labs straight over to Circuit right around that same time, middle of 24. He runs sales, go-to-market, marketing, and product. And he was the superstar at Silicon Labs, ran all of our kind of corporate systems, like all the implementation of all the corporate systems, and ran global growth over in the sales team, and then ran our AI council for a couple of years, evaluated several hundred AI tools. And so he came in with a lot of knowledge on the sales and how the product comes together and how to actually make it useful within companies. And so he's very strong. Jackie Paget, who runs culture and people. She was in our marketing and our HR teams. She was kind of my voice and my heart, and just a help to to build up the team and make things work. And so she's co-founder. And then Øyvind Loe, we acquired his company. He's from Norway. It was a Norwegian company. That was my second acquisition when I took over Silicon Labs as CEO. And he moved to Austin to help integrate the technology and the culture and some of these things into Silicon Labs. And he ended up meeting a Texan and getting stuck. So
Okay.
he was here, and then he had a cybernetics background. He'd done chip design. He's a business savvy, and then did a software startup, and he was just wrapping that up. And so he joined as CTO. I've got two very strong technical leaders, kind of two VP of engineering and then CTO that are bolted up at the hip to run the technical team. So I've got we started the company with some very strong talent, and and also a lot of knowledge and deep knowledge. Semiconductors are manufacturing related, and so a deep knowledge in the manufacturing space. And then we can talk a little bit more about the strategy of what we're doing there, but it really helped to inform the journey that we've been on.
Yeah, well, I always say if the four most important things in real estate are location. In tech startups, it's management, market, technology, and so it's good to have this strong
We
foundation.
can step right through that if you'd like.
Yeah, no. Listen, we're going to run out of time so fast. I want to get going. So, and for those that don't know, Anduril, if you want to buy shares in Anduril right now, it's like 61 billion. So it's like another, incredibly fast moving kind of pre-IPO, stock that would have gone public a long time ago. But so Circuit AI, rather than take a victory lap on, seeing your last company IPO at 3.5 billion plus and then get sold for 8 billion, you're right back at it, which I love. No time to take a long vacation there, but vertical
I
AI
play
agent.
golf and don't vacation very well. So it's, I'm always learning and always trying to build.
Okay, and I love the gym, like the weight room in the office, which I think is a great way to have meetings. So you'll for sure live longer doing this. But so over to Circuit AI. How would you describe what Circuit AI is doing right now?
Yeah, so first of all, you've got to kind of think through, you're doing a startup and you've got to think through where you're going to focus and realized early on, first of all, that the application of AI, this new technology, and all of the capital investments that are going into building data centers, going into building semiconductor fabs and the energy infrastructure, building on top of that and applying it into the economy was the place that was going to, it's a green field of opportunity. And that's where tremendous value is going to be created. And then, where are you going to focus that? And so I also realized a couple things. One is the more technical the information that you're dealing with. In other words, the harder it is for people to understand information, the higher the value of AI. And then on top of that, there's value. In other words, AI is going to help make companies more productive so the value you're going to create is making companies more productive and helping them drive revenue faster and more efficiently. And so workflows that depend on that technical information, and think about it at scale, and think about technical information similar to, like, I've written a lot of data sheets at Silicon Labs. You have a lot of corporate documents, you have data sheets, you have application notes, you have quotes, you have all the different unstructured data in the company that's spread out all over the place, and it's very hard for people to understand or to even find where it is. And to be able to do that, like on one document, just take one data sheet. You've got diagrams, schematics, figures, tables, flow charts, all sorts of graphical information. And then you've got, these are deep technical topics and what relates to what, understanding what's in a document, not just extract the text, put it in a database and rag it. It's really understand what that means and what relates to what in one document. And then to do that at scale across thousands or tens of thousands of documents, and then combine that data with what's in our systems of record, our ERP systems, our CRM systems, which I can promise you that, we had SAP and we had Salesforce, and they were a pain in the rear. And very difficult to use, very difficult to manage. and they had nothing to do with all the other information, and and so many manual workflows. So manual workflows that depend on that technical information have a very high value to automate. So the second thing really, or really the third thing there is you've got to figure out where you're going to focus as a startup. And so we come from the manufacturing space, and so we pretty quickly decided that we're going to go focus on manufacturing and supply chain. Silicon Labs, we used TSMC as our wafer fab. We were about $1 billion company when I left. We had 20,000 customers, and we sold components.
It's $1 billion in revenue. You built it to $1 billion in revenue. Yeah.
We had about 2,000 employees. Global business, 12 design sites around the world. Big channel. And we sold into, it was about 60% industrial. If you think about, okay, now am I going to do consumer or enterprise? It's like, well, if you're going to do consumer, it's hard to figure out how to make money, and you're going to be advertising and going up against Google and Meta. So, okay, you're going to be on the enterprise side. And within enterprise, you want to do B2B, not B2C. If you think that, in other words, B2B enterprise industrial is kind of like maximum complexity in terms of the information you're dealing with. So we are on the heavy industrial side of manufacturing, and manufacturing is about 15 to 20% of the U.S. economy. One of my, I've got two other roles. February of 2020, I joined the Dallas Federal Reserve Bank board. I was the only engineer on that board, really the only tech person, the only Austin person. And had a unique perspective, but so in other words, finance and economics. And I also joined the board of the new Texas Stock Exchange up in Dallas, and so that kind of gives you a little bit of perspective on where the economy is going and how the economy works and where the capital flows are going. And in manufacturing, you've got there's $1 trillion plus going into building data centers and semiconductor fabs and energy infrastructure per year, and that number's scaling up. That's where a lot of money is going. You've got municipal infrastructure, you've got commercial building, there's just massive capital going in there, and then you've got all the suppliers into that chain. You've got all the people that are building that stuff out, and there's 100,000 companies involved in manufacturing in the U.S. So it's a very large, diverse market, and the other thing that you've got in that space is, AI, the big fear is that it's replacing jobs, right? So, it's going to, whether you're in legal or you're in healthcare or you're in accounting and finance or in middle management, there's, AI is super capable. This is, the next wave of technical disruption in the economy, bigger than computing, bigger than the internet, bigger than the cloud, bigger than mobile, I think. In manufacturing, it's kind of almost the opposite. We're engaged with a lot of companies now, and universally, it's like they can't find enough people. So manufacturing is complicated products, not very sophisticated IT, not enough people, a shortage of workers. They're talking about in the next 5 years a shortage of several million workers, and you have to find people that are capable of understanding this information and then applying it. We also wanted to focus on the front end of the house, the revenue side. So we're focusing on pre and post sales within this. And pre-sales, think of that at things like pricing, quoting, configuration, CPQ, takeoffs. In other words, you get a customer opportunity, you got to respond to the customer opportunity, and then go back and forth. So there's a whole workflow there. And then once you sell, you've got a service, you got to install, you got to maintain, you got warranty, you got other things that and all of that involves people, and all of it involves all this technical information at the foundation. And so that's kind of how we came into our focus in manufacturing. And Circuit is essentially trying to be the toolbox for manufacturers for an AI-enabled future. So we are starting off with technically enabling the workforce. And then the first vertical workflow that we're automating is the CPQ, configuration, price, quote, takeoffs, that sort of, think about it as like getting RFQs, RFPs, highly complicated products, highly complicated things, and then being able to automate that whole process, whereas today that is entirely manual. And the other thing that's happening at a lot of these companies is you have a lot of senior people that really are on top of a lot of these things that have to happen. And their average age is like 57 years old. People are retiring out. And so a lot of the institutional knowledge is like, it's a real struggle to, to scale companies, to keep up with everything that needs to get done. And then people are walking out the door and retiring. And if you can embed that into a system, and then continuously improve that system, it doesn't replace that senior engineer. It frees them up to go do more. But it also helps to onboard new people onto that flow and potentially expand the workforce on that side as well. So in other words, if there's a shortage of people, you want to get as much as you can out of the people that are available, and you want to potentially expand the pool of the number of people that are available. So these tools that we're developing help manufacturers solve those problems. Currently we're focusing on front of house, the revenue side, which is where the money is. Back to having a blank sheet of paper. It's really nice, when you're a startup, is you can be selective. You don't have legacy and baggage. You can take an AI first approach to everything you do to be super efficient. You're not constrained by the way things were done in the past, and everything is growth. And you can focus on the most highly valuable pieces to go after first. And then the other challenge with a startup is that you got to figure out how to get scale, right, and how to get efficient in what you're doing over time. And so I think, that is why, over the last year, we've really been able to fine tune and work with customers to define specifically the place. And so we've been making a lot of progress.
Well, we've been involved with some very well-financed AI companies that were seeing every application that their technology could do and kind of throwing it out there and not going for enough of a wedge. What I like about what you guys are doing is saying, if you knock on the door, and of course you and your team have all these relationships, and you say, I'm going to help you win that business and do it super efficiently in a way that the human, would struggle to do. That's a great wedge to get in. And then say, okay, now that we're here and we're part of your business, we can take all of that technical information, stick it onto our circuit, as it were, and then it can pop out the other side. And I don't know, I remember being very young and hearing that if you buy a car made in Germany or you buy a car made in the United States, there's like 26 countries involved in spark plugs made in Belgium, whatever. It's coming from all these different places. So if you can get like unstructured data on one side, pop it through your magic box circuit and allow it to pop out, and it starts with the responding to how do I put together all this technical stuff to win new revenue, new bid. It just seems like a good starting point.
Ultimately, we're building an agentic AI system and knowledge graphs, and there's underlying technology there. I mean, I think we're better at understanding technical information than anybody in the world right now. And and getting the right answers and being able to surface the right, in other words, it's like an expert has read the information. And when we benchmark against other systems with customers, that's proving out. But it's you don't have to you want to solve the same problem multiple times and get better and better and better at it. And then but at the same time, as you're working with companies, there's adjacent opportunities that you're going to start aggregating and start expanding to become that orchestration layer or the new network layer or the new platform that underlies a lot of these, basically building a new interface over the top of the corporate data and all this. But if I said that was what I was doing first, and I did something different for every customer that I'm engaged with, I would never be able to get off the ground because it wouldn't be.
Have those references. I want to talk about the sales cycle, but like a quick sidebar, we invested in a company called Terzo AI that went to the Home Depot and said, how many suppliers do you have? And think of all those nails, hammers, doors, chandeliers, everything in a Home Depot, and think of a PDF document from every single one of them with FOB this, net payment, this many days. And how many humans would you have to pay from Accenture to come in and read that, Raiders of the Lost Ark warehouse of all the paper? It's just impossible, right? And so nobody can read all that. Whereas you throw AI at that very specific thing as a wedge, and say, I'm going to read your contract. I'm going to check the bank logs of people wiring on time or not. And I'm going to look at the invoices, and I'm going to find errors and mistakes. I'm going to make you very happy. And if they can do that for the Home Depot, they can guess how many contracts, Cisco has. Quite a few. But the thing is, and this is where I wanted to lead it back to you, Tyson, because I see a lot of similarities. It's a sales cycle. If you're selling to the Fortune 100, that is going to be a long, expensive sales cycle. Not everyone's going to get to the end of the rainbow there. When you get in, you probably have your hooks into them, for some time. Add manufacturing where, like, if one little girl gets run over from a truck backing up in Japan, that's like the end of Denso, who made the part that was in the Toyota. So you're dealing with manufacturing as like, it's got a conservative, non-Silicon Valley, non-Austin technology, startup speed mentality.
I mean, there's a middle America aspect of this, right? And I mean, and we are engaged with, some of the top 10 EPC companies in the world. I can't name them. We're working with Culligan and, Orkin and pipe and valve and fitting companies and some semiconductor companies and, lighting companies. We're working with a lot of different sub-verticals within manufacturing and people that are also service companies that are, actually taking technology and putting it out into the, and the AI can be very, very flexible about that. The go-to-market is interesting because it's like you could just go, I mean, we could go to Northrop Grumman and just get stuck. I mean, we're 30 people, right? And so it's like, where do you start? With a large company, you typically start with, there's going to be one product line, one business leader, and you go in and show, and then it's really a land and expand with everyone. Culligan Water.
I kind of viewed it as wedge in, we're going to help you close this revenue, and then wedge two is land and expand. Now that there's some trust.
Land and expand is helping other parts of the company or other partner, channel partner. Culligan Water was one of our first contracts. And they're a $3 billion company. They're the largest water filtration company in the world. Private equity owned. They've done 300 acquisitions over the last 5 years, 32 different product lines. And they sell their products through 1,000 franchises and dealers globally, and there's tens of thousands of people out servicing and installing this stuff. And they struggled with all the things we talked about earlier. And they've got, so we've got opportunities with multiple parts and multiple parts of Culligan. We've got opportunities with, not just technical enablement, but also CPQ with different parts. But it's like, we started with technical enablement for the workforce, and then you've got opportunities within their distribution network as well. And so you form that customer relationship. It's not like you sign a contract and you walk away. That's the beginning of a long-term relationship. And you get your champions and you start working throughout the organization and working on deployment and helping making, that customer successful. The interesting thing also in the AI world is like the more usage there is, there's the more you can do with this system. It's all consumption driven. And so it's consumption price. This is not, we're not saying, it's like going to cost, X dollars per seat.
But with Culligan, there was a real, I saw some information that what was taking them like an hour, you got it down to like 11 seconds or something. And then you're able to put together like, this is the amount of money we're going to save you over this period of time or something that you could then show to Daimler or somebody else that's dealing with similar situation. Didn't you have like some case study with those guys?
One of the big things in service organizations is rollbacks. It's like if you send somebody out to solve a problem and they can't figure out the answer, they come home and they got to get a part, or they got to ask the question. If they can't solve the problem, they got to go back out again, and that's hundreds of dollars. And so you add just that one piece for Culligan across their U.S. distribution network was $10 million a year. And the thing is like with in the prior world, they would if they didn't know the answer, they would go and try to search for the information and then have to read through a 200-page data sheet. The first thing they do is they just get on the phone. Culligan had 4,000 people, like basically, servicing the field, being there to answer questions and, help, help people in the field be successful. Now they can just go onto Circuit and they get the answer to the question. It gives them exactly what they need. They don't have to open up the documents. They don't have to call somebody. And so it's like the productivity savings is, I mean, and you know, that $10 million number came from them, not from us. But if you think about, you know, how much more efficient they can be, how much more business they can drive, and how much more they can get out of the folks that are available is remarkable. And so that kind of quick time to value of, like, you're adopting a system, how do they see value of it really quickly, and then really measuring the ROI. I mean, we're very focused on, like, a lot of AI that companies try to deploy. It's like super hard, or people are like, you know, not using it. How does it, you know, there was a study last year that said that, you know, 95% of the AI pilots fail. It's like we've kind of lived through that in the deployment of AI within our organization. You know, not at Circuit, but at Silicon Labs. And so really focused on that up front is like, how do you, the surveys that come back of like how much people just love to use this compared to the way they were doing it before, because they can find exactly what they need. And that means that they can get more done, and they spend less time on a lot of things that are just repetitive and manual and difficult.
Yeah. And I want to lead to, you know, sometimes it's the founders who know what's going on because they're domain experts, and the VCs are kind of like idiots, and maybe they don't understand.
I would never say that.
Never. You know, we're seeing it like in our own portfolio of, like, a real estate agent can ask the AI a complicated question of what is the law in Wyoming versus Montana and California, and it's just like boom, they now have absolute expertise, as opposed to writing Wilson Sonsini and waiting a day, or their own internal, you know, general counsel contract. So I can imagine that when things get technical in manufacturing, and you've got many players to ship one final, you know, off the assembly line product, that only gets further along. With VCs, I would think that VCs figured out that hardware was hard, and they were bad investors at it. I even have my own personal experiences in IoT and stuff. But then again, if you're like the Circuit software layer that takes the unstructured, pops it out on the other side, they probably can get their heads around it. What's been your experience since we just signed all of our docs on March 31st here on VCs getting excited about rejuvenating American manufacturing and not being dependent on, you know, Asian suppliers for everything?
The biggest round of you know, VC round in Austin. I think Saronic, $1.6 billion or $1.7 billion that they just raised. You know, I think that was just earlier this week or last week. I mean, I think VCs. There's a lot of VCs funding hardware. You know, not necessarily semiconductors, but you know, various types of products out there. Yes, and I did live through the IoT world. We did successfully build $1 billion company in that, but it was 10 years and a lot of investment.
You may have benefited from less competition. So how do you feel about, there's a lot of AI startups trying to go after wealth managers and make each endpoint.
I mean, there are like expert. If I look at what we're competing with, we're fundamentally competing with it's a green field right now. We, like any company that we're talking to, there's not another company that's like in there talking to them about the same thing or what we're doing in the manufacturing space. Now, everybody is using Claude, everybody's using, you know, OpenAI or Copilot or whatever else. The challenge with these tools, you know, you use the example of, you know, an attorney or whatever. You can deploy these tools, and each individual person has to kind of set them up. And there are some people that are going to do it well and some people that aren't. But there's not really a consistent enterprise deployment of these tools where people really know what to do and know how to use them. That enterprise deployment in a consistent way that actually then people can use to get their job done, and that people actually do use it, that's very hard. And you know, I was, you know, at Silicon Labs, we were kind of tired of, you know, we had SAP and we had Salesforce, and you would talk to them and you want something that's like, those are platforms that cross every industry. And there were specific things that were manufacturing specific, how the types of products you're working with, and the way you go to market, and the channels and the relationships that you have with your suppliers and your customers. There's things that we would need that they wouldn't do, or it was like massively complex to customize. And so I think that focus in on manufacturing, we understand those flows. And you talked earlier about like Fortune 100 companies. They've got software teams, and you go talk to Caterpillar. They're half a software company almost, right? They'll work with BCG, or they'll work with Deloitte, or they might work with Palantir and do this big custom development, and then they've got to maintain that. These are massive investments, and you're right. Like if that was the first place we start, we would be trying to displace that sort of stuff. We're not displacing any software. Like with medium size, even some of the larger companies. I mean, we're working with one of the top 10 importers of goods into the U.S. and they don't have AI. They don't even have an ERP system, and it's so that they're sophisticated products, not so sophisticated on the IT side. The largest companies have some element of that, and ultimately there's an opportunity for a new platform and a new orchestration layer and a new interface over the top of all these systems, because it's not just what's in your ERP system, it's not just what's in Salesforce, it's the combination of that with everything else within your company and across those systems, specifically tied to how companies do their work.
And those companies are legacy. They're not built today, so they've got those challenges. So to wrap up on this, I would say, I think of this as like founder market fit, that you've brought the team from Silicon Labs with a real Marine who's all go, 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 Matt Weiss in the energy, and now you've got funding. So with this round closed and done, and we all got our nice markup on that.
We closed the angel round. We've now got our Series A. We've got a lead with Supply Capital, and we're raising another 15 to close out the round. So that angel round was on a safe, and so we closed out the safe, and now we have a priced round, and pulling in another 15. That piece is going to. I mean, we're hoping to get all the commits and all that stuff this month, and then close that out here in second quarter.
Okay.
Yeah.
That'll be good to see that rounded out. So with financing aside, and I want to leave a minute to talk about.
And that gives us multiple years of runway to build into a serious multiple in terms of that will fund the revenue ramp, and we're already, the product is already there. We've already got the full stack technical team, and that will also help to fund out a little bit more investment on the go-to-market side.
Okay, so what will Circuit AI look like in 2-3 years from now?
Yeah, so our goal is to come out of 2027, with hundreds of customers and tens of millions of revenue, and so we will probably end up doing a Series B in that 2028 timeframe. And at that point, we will have, a lot of that CPQ and a lot of the technical enablement. I mean, we will remain focused in the manufacturing space, but there will be adjacent applications and verticals that we will end up likely wanting to. I mean, the opportunity is so big, and you don't want to undershoot it. But I think that for the next year and a half, it's going to be stay focused in our lane and get really, really good at what we're doing. You're getting more efficient at our go-to-market. One of the things that we've got, how long does it take, and how much effort is it for each customer? And for instance, in Q1, we started a customer engagement and signed a contract all within the same quarter. And Culligan took us about 5 months because it was, they were a pilot and we were developing the product, they were a pilot customer for us. But getting that process compressed and also more efficient and then getting the resources, because you've got to actually, these are personal relationships. You're not going to replace a customer relationship with AI, certainly not at this point. And then the other thing is that I probably haven't talked enough about like the CPQ. A typical CPQ system can take 3 to 6 months to implement, and big teams of people, and are driven by rules and mostly driven by their ERP system. let me just give you an example that's easier to understand, and we're both in Texas here. So you want to buy a new F-150. So you go to the Ford dealer and you walk in the door and they're like, what do you want? Oh, I want a pickup truck. Okay, I want a Ford F-150. I want it to be blue. I want the tan seats. I want these features. I want the King Ranch version. And so you can figure up, what's possible. And it's like, oh, well, you want these wheels. Well, they don't come with the King Ranch or whatever. And so the configurator is a CPQ system, and they have to have one because the dealer, and then that goes into their systems, and they're like, okay, here's your price, there's one in stock here, or here's your lead time, here's when we can deliver that truck to you, and then and there's a quote, and then they sell it. That's a CPQ system, old school. And think about that. That's a very simple version. Think about a Boeing airliner, or and we're working with companies that are and the biggest companies have done that. And to set up all those rules, and then when you change the model year, or when you add a product into the system, you got to change all the rules. So it's like massive maintenance to do this. We are implementing this with AI to generate the rules from what's in the ERP and from all the technical information. So we can actually auto-create this stuff in like half a day. Yeah. And so the implementation is like shrinks massively. And then as you update things, it gets refigured and recalculated. It's like there's an auto update of all the rules. And so it takes this functionality that was only available to the largest companies and makes that accessible to medium and smaller companies. And it's not just that configuration and pricing part. It actually automates everything from the sales opportunity, the RFQ or the takeoff document or whatever the customer opportunity comes in. We can understand that with AI. We can map that to all the unstructured information, and then we can configure it, price it, and quote it right there. So it's like it's just a leapfrog in functionality and a much simpler way to implement, and that has huge value. And that's what it's like so exciting. When you finally figure out, okay, that's the highest. I mean, this is $2, $3, $4, $500,000 sort of value of a product. And then it's like it's given us the opportunity to say, we just need to focus on this. And it's about a $5 billion market opportunity just in the US. And there's nobody doing it this way. And we need to just go rinse and repeat and move as fast as we can. And so that's just super exciting to have that focus. At the same time, you got to keep your eyes open and understand, what's going to be next on the road. But that's what we're raising the money for right now, is to go and execute on that plan to make that.
So if anyone listening is interested in either backing the company, getting involved, or even if you know people in manufacturing, particularly the CPQ area, get in touch and we'll navigate our way to the right guys.
I mean, in some ways, it's like our pipeline on the investor side is pretty full, and actually our pipeline on the customer side, but it's like, I was doing a talk the other day, and there was another group that was talking about non-dilutive funding, and I was like, the best non-dilutive funding is revenue.
Yeah, that's right.
And it's like actually the most valuable thing to us right now is connections in with customers, and we're ready to engage. And if you know somebody that's in that business to business, enterprise, industrial, manufacturing space, most valuable thing you could do for us right now.
I've introduced you guys to a lot of CVCs, like corporate venture groups, that sometimes might be too slow to get in a deal before it closes, but they might be able to navigate you to the right head of a business unit that collapses the time on the sales cycle. So you can't lose in taking those calls for guys like you. I know we're out of time. You are on the board of the Texas Stock Exchange. What's the problem you're solving there in like a minute? Like, what does it cost to list? Is this like trying to be the ASX or TMX or AIM, or?
This is aiming to be the New York Stock Exchange, but in Texas. They've raised $275 million. They've got SEC approval. First trade start mid-year. And, so we're going to have ETFs, we're going to have dual listings, primary listings, IPOs. It's going to be a full service market based right here in Texas. There was some legislative work done both on corporate law and on equity markets. So we banned per transaction taxes in Texas, which has been threatened in New York and New Jersey. The idea is to just build a more efficient, more innovative exchange right here in Texas. And if you look at the size of our economy, you look at the number of companies that are here, and helping to make the equity markets more accessible. We talked about, Anduril is still private. How do you get companies want to go public to where it's like the cost of going public? And the cost is not just dollars, it's also requirements and other things. How do you make that easier? Not reduce the quality. Anduril certainly is qualified to go public.
No doubt.
And there's multiple reasons for that. So I think that bringing innovation into that space, you've had a duopoly for a long time, and we've got the scale here in Texas to make this happen. So the goal is to be first the number 3, and then to go straight after the New York exchanges. I'd also say in Texas, moving corporate registrations from Delaware and other places, that you're probably going to see more of that trend. We spent a lot of time on business law, some of the business court system here in Texas. This is almost like there are plenty of countries that are smaller than Texas that have their own exchanges and own markets, and it's really exciting. They've also just built an incredible team. They've been able to hire a lot of the executive talent. Dallas is the number 2 financial capital in the U.S. I mean, you got J.P. Morgan, you got BlackRock, you've got Citadel, you've got Schwab. You've got a bunch of leading companies that have invested in this and are either on the board or steering, helping to steer this effort. So it's got some real backers. It's really, I think, in the right place at the right time. So it's a really exciting opportunity.
Every VC has always said Delaware C corps. That's all we do. But I think when you see like Elon's one shareholder of like $5 of Tesla, with these lawyers chasing after him with Delaware law, that's gonna be maybe a bit of a catalyst to get people to.
You may have seen that ExxonMobil, which had been, I think they were headquartered in New Jersey, or not headquartered, but domiciled in New Jersey for 100 and some odd years, just re-domiciled to Texas.
Yeah, I'm sure. So. Listen, Tyson, I know you got to bounce, so let's wrap it up there. Thank you so much, and look forward to seeing you guys real soon.
Thanks, appreciate the time. Thanks, everybody.
Okay, bye for now.
Bye-bye.